Welcome to Culture Before Content. Culture Before Content from Music for All and presented by Yamaha. And now, here's your host, David Duarte.
Hey, welcome to the show. Welcome to today's episode of Culture Before Content. We're excited to have you on the Music for All podcast network. And I'd also like to thank Yamaha, our national presenting sponsor, for their incredible and ongoing support in making this podcast possible for everyone tuning in. At Music for All and within the Culture Before Content community, our mission is to create, provide, and expand positively life-changing experiences through music. To me, this podcast is more than just inspiration. It's a valuable opportunity for professional development. Each episode allows us to learn from and connect with some of the most insightful voices in music education today. We can validate and implement fresh ideas in our classrooms by exploring practical strategies and personal perspectives from our guests. I hope every episode inspires and empowers you to make a meaningful and lastful difference in your students' lives. First, thanks for joining us on Facebook or YouTube. If you're here live, we'd love for you to be a part of the conversation, ask questions, share your thoughts, and interact with us in real time. Give it a shot. Try it out. If you missed the live broadcast, the entire video will be available for rebroadcast immediately after the show. Do you prefer audio? Episodes are typically available on Mondays through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other podcast platforms. For more details, please visit us at musicforall.org/podcasts. All right, so let's talk about last week. Last week, we had an amazing saxophonist and teacher, Cord Martin. He is an accomplished jazz musician and middle school band director who blends professional expertise with a deep passion for teaching at Whitthorne Middle School. He creates a positive and supportive classroom culture. He emphasizes personal growth, musical excellence, and community connection. Through his Tiger Cats Jazz Band, he helps students build confidence, master sight reading, and develop improvisational skills. He draws from experiences like in performing with Aretha Franklin, which was amazing to talk about. He inspires students to embrace music as a tool for expression, connection, and lifelong learning. You should go check it out. And I learned today, if you're in Nashville, go see him December 22nd. He's performing. He's amazing. Go listen to him. Now let's get on to this week. I am so excited. Today is our first international show. Today we have Kenley Kristofferson. He is a music educator and composer who is deeply committed to fostering a culture of creativity and connection through music. As a composer and educator, he emphasizes the transformative power of music in building community and inspiring personal growth. His works often explore themes of identity, place, and collaboration, reflecting his belief that music can bring people together and create shared experiences. Kristofferson's teaching focuses on empowering students to connect with music meaningfully, encourage them to explore their unique voices while contributing to a larger cultural narrative. Through his compositions and educational work, he champions music as a personal and collective expression of humanity. So please welcome to the show, Mr. Kenley Kristofferson.
Hi, David. Thanks so much for having me today.
Oh, welcome so much. Well, first off, this is so exciting. I know it's, we probably don't live that far apart. I'm just saying, but it's really nice to finally connect a little on a broad, and expand the audience. And also for our guests to meet another composer and another person who expands the music, not only through your teaching, but through what you can do with your own personal connections as well through music. And I think that is absolutely fantastic.
Well, thank you.
Well, let's start off with, why don't you tell us a little about who's Kenley Kristofferson? Tell us who you are.
Absolutely. So I'm a music educator here in Selkirk, Manitoba. I teach high school band, jazz, and academic music at the Lord Selkirk Regional Comprehensive Secondary School. Ooh. And it's a long name, but it's a wonderful place to work. And there are great kids. I know there are great kids everywhere, but I sure like mine. And I live in Winnipeg, which is just down the road from Selkirk, about 20 minutes south. And I'm married. I have two kids. I have a 3-year-old and a 7-year-old who are a barrel of monkeys, and they're lots of fun. And when I'm not hanging out with that crew or the adolescent crew here at high school, I'm writing music for concert band, concert choir, orchestra, and video games when I can. I haven't done as much. I've been leaning pretty hard into band lately, but writing is a really great way to share music and experience music, and to show kids, especially that, it helps when you do the thing. You're doing the thing that they're doing. And there's a degree of modeling that is really effective, I think. And then you can share with them what you're working on. I mean, oftentimes my bands will kind of proofread my work And, they love telling me when I've missed a mezzo forte somewhere, or like there's no rehearsal figure in tenor sax, or, like all that stuff. But I mean, we do it together, and it really does kind of link my creative work with my work with kids.
Yeah, that's amazing. So let's talk a little bit about your creative work. So I'm just going to kind of take over here and kind of go with, okay, so your creative work, you do have a lot of cultural identity built inside of it. Can you talk about maybe what some of your inspirations are? Just talk about any of your pieces of work, and maybe give us let's just get a conversation going on the cultural side of your music.
Absolutely. So one commission that I had about 10 years ago is a piece called Matters of Kindness. And when I was asked to write it, there was a school in Alberta from a town called Olds, Alberta. And the teacher contacted me and said one of their students had passed away and they would like me to write a piece for them. And I was quite scared, I will confess. I thought this is a get it right kind of commission. And so I did some research. I read the obituary of the young woman. Her name was Madison Fleming, and she passed away at 15 from type 1 diabetes. And when I read about her and about her life and her way of being, that she was focused on kindness, and kindness is like a way of being in the world, not just like opening a door for somebody, but like kind of eat, sleeping, and breathing, like a kind way of being, and like living life to its fullest, finding that joie de vivre that a lot of teenagers have, right? And when I read about her, I thought like I have to do it. Like she just felt like a kindred spirit to me, and I started writing, and the ball just started rolling. And before long, I was really quite moved by this whole experience. And I shared some drafts with the teacher, and the teacher said, yeah, like you're on the right track. This is sounding really nice. And then that year I was actually on sabbatical for my work in 2014. And I was doing a residency near the mountains in Banff, Alberta. And Banff is a hop, skip, and a jump from Olds. So I finished the piece, and we decided we were going to present the work to her class, and they were going to read it. And I worked with them on some other stuff first, and then the teacher and I looked at each other and thought, like, I think it's now. This is the time. And there were all these students who became kind of very nervous, and the piece came in front of them, and we started playing it, and you could see their eyes welling up, and the feeling that they were starting to deal with something that maybe they had pushed down, maybe they hadn't been thinking about, they'd been pushing away. And then now the music education was really about feelings, about loss, about friendship, about identity. And it was one of the most impactful, capital M, capital E music education moments, where we are really doing something that matters. And it affirms in our room that like what we're doing matters. We're not just rehearsing the B section at measure 47. Like we are making connections. We're helping kids connect with emotions and deal with vulnerability, because how on earth can you make something feel like sorrow or sadness or joy if we don't work with our kids in feeling and teaching them to feel that vulnerability quite on display in the band? So I think it really affirmed that we can connect with the band room's culture through our repertoire. And that's not saying we can't play pieces that are fun or pieces that are narrative, but there is a place for impactful, powerful music in the band room, and that can be a really great avenue and vehicle for connecting kids with the space, their feelings, and some real concrete life skills, I think.
Yeah, I really think it takes a lot of work, to make music impact the students in more than a way and just, I like this piece, is so powerful. And what it must have felt like for you, for the kids to like connect. I mean, it's, getting kids to tear up through the power of music, maybe it took that personal expression or that personal connection to do that. But what do you feel like that taught you about, not only writing for music, but also teaching music? What kind of impacts or changes did it have on you?
I think that when we work with intent, when we work with awareness, and that we're really intentional on the rep we pick, on the strategies that we connect in our classroom, that it can't just be in the moment. Like I think a lot of teachers are really present about like thinking ahead and planning. We generally, our profession attracts planners as it is. So we can look for music that's like, oh, this is really this is really going to move people. So right now, for example, I'm playing Aaron Keaton Howard's Joy, Wanderlust, Wanderlust in my junior symphonic band. And like, we're talking about like joy. Like, what does it sound like when it's joyous? Are you feeling joyous? It's my 7:45 in the morning band. So sometimes I have the joy is subdued, but as teachers, we can bring gas to the bonfire, and we can bring up energy, and we can get kids moving at 7:45 in the morning. And we're talking about all these concepts, and like I invite you to feel joy. What feels joyous in your life, and not just like what makes you happy. Like, it's beyond joy. And there's a piece of mine actually called Transcendent Light, and the first movement is about joy, and it was about another music educator and chair and president of our Manitoba Band Association. But anyway, I was having a hard time starting because he had passed away, and I didn't want it to start like really sad or dark.
Right.
So I was picking up something from the music store, like reeds or something kind of like inconsequential. And I ran into another music educator, and he asked how the piece was coming. And his name was Andy Clausen. And I said, "Oh, Andy, like I got the end down, but I just don't know how to start this thing. Like, I want it to be happy. I don't want it to be happy, but I want it to be, impactful." And then Andy stopped me in the woodwind section of the store. And he says, no, Kenley, like, happy is light that comes from the outside, but the light that comes from the inside is joy. And I think about that quite a lot, and how we bring that energy to students. Joy is what comes from within.
So you said the magical word. You said intent. What advice do you have for teachers in general about, not maybe just picking music, or even teaching with intent, picking music with intent? What kind of advice do you have for that?
Well, there are a couple of different ways we could take this.
Right.
One thing I think about lately with intent is about picking diverse repertoire, and that we're looking on purpose for diverse rep that has composers that look like our students and look like the demographics in our room, because we want kids to feel seen. And I mean, I know it's real easy to in jazz band play another Count Basie tune, in concert band to play an old tried and true, a band teak, as it were. But we can be on purpose looking for new rep, looking for diverse voices, and getting ways for kids to connect with the repertoire. And we know that when kids feel seen, they connect more. We know that through experience and through research. And that's worth it. That is worth every extra prep on publishers' websites, on indie composers forums. Like, it's worth looking. And sometimes with rep, it doesn't come to us in some kind of music store catalog. Like, we've got to go looking. And I think that intent is part of it.
Yeah. So then that leads me to this question, which is, how can inclusive band literature impact students' engagement with the music?
Yeah. Oh, goodness. Absolutely. I got some. There we go. So I remember one moment very clearly, actually. So it was fall. It was maybe around 2015 or so. And I was handing up music for junior symphonic that year. And one piece was Mystery on Men Mountain by Julie Giroux. And I can visualize my female euphonium player in the back. And when I put the piece out, she called out to the band, "It's written by a woman." And it was so notable to her that she had to scream it out in the band. And I just thought, like, that's so powerful. And I just tried it. I was like, hey, well, Julie Giroux, this is before I knew much of her music.
Right.
And I was like, wow, I have to pivot here a bit. And I remember that moment of like, I need to put some attention toward this. And I think, when we make a concerted effort to play music by diverse voices, whether it's the inclusion of female composers or members of the LGBTQ plus community, or Black and Indigenous composers and people of color, minorities or underrepresented composers, like, it's all really, really important. And I have a hot take here, if you don't mind me saying.
Please.
Yeah, having been someone, who's been teaching band for 17 years, I've seen a lot of band music. And I truly believe that we're in a concert band renaissance right now. And I think that diverse voices are a huge part of that. I think that the concert band music right now is better than it's been in a long time. And I think this is one of the best times I can remember to pick new, amazing rep for our groups. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Oh, I do. Did you see? You can see my eyeballs go like, oh, that brings up a great point, because I literally just sent my secretary my final choices for festival season for like
Mhm.
that. And it's funny because the last one was the Julie Giroux piece,
Amazing.
Journey through Orion, because I struggle just as my personal way of going, picking with intent. Sometimes it's the experience, sometimes it's the culture, sometimes it's just the message that the music creates. And I am very purposeful on that because I do want representation in my voices. And by the way, I'm year 35, and it took me half of my career to realize how important that is. I got Katash Copley coming on. I got a Maslanka piece coming. So I try to be purposeful in what I do, and I have been really intentful, because you're right. When that person says, "Oh my God, I didn't even realize that this was a career in music, or that I could be represented," it's so powerful. So to me, it comes down to like thinking about the band director, because I hear it all the time. I'm very, people may not think I pay attention, but I think I hear everything. But what do you say to the band director that's, well, I feel like we're forcing things down. I don't know where this voice came from. I feel like we're forcing things down people to be like purposely intentful. What, and say, well, it doesn't matter. And I say it does, but I'm just saying, how do we be intentful in our programming, but at the same time be more natural with that programming, so that it doesn't feel like, I know some people it feels forced upon them, where I feel like now in my experience it is the way it needs to be and has to be, because you could do the old tried and trues. And this is why for me it's so important to do planning for a year and not a concert, because that way you can kind of say, well, I really want to do this piece that's an old tried and true, but I really want to get so-and-so's work or so-and-so's message, or and so what do you say to the band director who says it feels more forced, or this is too forced upon us?
I think that's a bad take, is my first instinct. I think that when you come in with that attitude, you already close doors to some pretty incredible music that's getting made out there, because you're looking at the label and not what's inside. And I just think that's a bad take, because there's so much great music out there. And
So
please go.
and the purpose for that was like kind of like the two-part question, because the first is, yeah, it is completely a bad take, but so what can we do to help the world think a little bit more globally, openly, and more inclusive, and that's where I'm at, because it's not that I felt it was forced upon. It's just that for me, it almost became like almost a reality check of like, oh, well, all this music that I'm, like I said, year 35, it wasn't very inclusive back in the day. And I don't think we thought of music that way, but we do now. It's completely a part of our culture as music educators. And I think that's, some of us who've been around a while, it was just like a pivot point and purposeful. So what can we do as a music education community to help some people bring that in? What ideas can we have to help people be a little bit more representative of all voices and cultures in front of us?
Well, one thing like that you're doing now with this podcast is one of those things. And as we keep showing people alternate ways of being, they just might catch on. So I think about university concerts now, where like they're focusing on that, and there's like all this great new music. And I think about high school concerts that I've gone to, or honor bands that our kids are playing in, and there's all this great new music from diverse voices. And I just think the music speaks for itself. And that's my opinion. And I think if someone is resistant, they can resist for so long, I guess, if they choose to, but like, why would you not play all this awesome new music that's different and exciting? And I remember I was talking to another composer friend of mine from Canada, and she had said, we were talking about like clarinets or like something craft related. And right. I have another hot take that there are times where there's just too much high clarinet in the world. So, you want to do with flute and oboe, great. Trumpet and unison, okay, fine. But have you thought about clarinets and trombone? Have you thought about clarinets and euphonium? Oh my gosh, low clarinet and French horn. Like, now we are talking. And she's like, I know, but like, it is kind of an old trope of the way that you handle the craft of like, well, clarinets are going to double flute at the octave, and like, now you got another band sounding piece. But then these new composers are saying like, well, what if I just do something else? What if I just make a different choice, and that different choice is exciting? I mean, that's just one example of what could be a million examples. But that to me is what's interesting, is a lot of them are making a concerted effort to break the mold. Mm-hmm. And that's really exciting.
Oh yeah, completely. And so that makes representation of music to me fosters inclusivity and celebrates diversity. That's like my new hot take on life. But what role does representation in band literature play in creating that inclusivity?
Right. I think anytime we make a person feel seen, like student or otherwise, we get more contribution from them to the organization. And that's not even about acknowledging diverse voices. That's just about helping people feel seen and heard on a human level. So the growth in representation across all media, I think, has really inspired so much confidence in these young people, and that they can achieve maybe more than they thought before. And that's what it feels like to play in a really excellent band. Like when we play music that celebrates different cultures and nationalities and regions, we expand our scope of seeing people, whether they're in our band or not. And I think that helps our students feel seen, but it also helps our kids see other kids and people in a more authentic way.
Yeah, that is a great take. And so the classroom environment can influence students' lifelong relationships with music, but what elements of the classroom culture shape students' long-term views in music? And I think that's, my question is, we're using this music, I don't know, maybe this is my hot take, but maybe the music that I select represents what's important maybe to me or what I think is going on in culture at the time. But how do we help that for the students? How do we help shape them? And then in return, how do they help shape us?
Yeah. Part of working in a school is being often at the forefront of culture. Now I teach in rural Manitoba, which is different than, say, downtown New York in terms of the bleeding edge of culture. But it does keep me in the loop, and it keeps me young. And I have a lot of high school folks who have very strong views about a lot of things that I maybe wouldn't have normally thought about. And that keeps me thinking about things. I think music programs and arts programs attract a kind of thinker about the world who is trying to figure out where they belong, trying to figure out what's next, trying to figure out the world beyond their bubble. And that helps me think about those same questions. Working with kids always keeps you sharp and on the furthest kind of front of culture. And I think sometimes when we talk to people who have not hung out with young people very much, that becomes very obvious.
Oh, yes. So maybe it's time for my hot take. I like this. I think this is the new part of the show today, is hot take or not hot take. Or should be hot take or cold take. I don't know. But I also think we need to bring a representation into our classroom of the kids who aren't there. So maybe the cultures and some of the diversity that's not there. But I also think in my brain, maybe we should also bring more of the culture into the classroom and don't just depend on the music. Do some research on it. Do some collaborative things on it. Don't just, the music has its purpose and place, but I think sometimes we can fall. This is my hot take. I think sometimes we fall into the trap that we only do the music. And I think we need to, I think one, we need to bring more of cultures into our classroom, but we need to also dive into it so that we're being purposeful in that look at the culture. Because bring the culture of the kids in your classroom, because boy, does that bring out a whole personality. Personal story from the week. I'm very good about giving my students here's the next concert, go listen to the music. And one of my students walked up to me on Thursday, goes, "Mr. Duarte, I want you to know that music is amazing." And I've started looking into it, and it caught me off guard because I just put it on the Google Classroom and let the announcements fly. I don't expect anything to do it. I just know it's there that way. When I go to refer to it, I have a place to refer to it. But he had already gotten into, it was the Julie Giroux piece actually. And he goes, "Oh my gosh, I got into that." He goes, "It just made me think about, what the piece represents." It was an unexpected conversation and what you said on a reminder. But like I said, bringing in those cultures that may be different than what's in front of you every day is not a bad idea. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I think about how I'm just trying to word this properly. I think about the composers who write music that draws upon their culture in a really authentic way and how that invigorates performance. So one example that is at the tip of my tongue is Jorge Vargas, if you know that name. He is, I think, a Mexican-American composer, but has lots of experience in mariachi bands, and playing music of his own culture. And so we've done his Paso Doble called Luna y Fuego, and it is like the real deal. Like, he's a great band composer, but when you play it, like, you know that this person understands this music very deeply and in a really authentic way. There's nothing stereotypical about it. There's nothing appropriative about it in any capacity. It is like super authentic and real. And he's writing a lot of like really great stuff. He's finished a cumbia last week that is something that I could never do. Like, that is his experience and his understanding. Like, he brings something really special to the band narrative right now of composing and new music. And so I think we have to make an effort to look for things that are authentic and real. And I think now is one of the best times in band history where we can do that.
Oh, definitely. And so, maybe we should also talk about, are we going to talk from the perspective of composition or the perspective of your classroom? Because I think as we move along here, I'm kind of like curious, because do you agree? This is my old game show called Agree or Disagree. Do you agree that, agree or disagree, has your classroom changed in your 17 years?
Oh, agree. Hard.
Yeah. and even that. So, 17 years. So we can kind of round it off to like, 5 or 6 year things. How much have you changed lately in maybe the last 5? Have you changed a bunch in the last 5 years? Agree or disagree?
Oh, agree. Yeah. My teaching partner, who I teach with, his name is Michael Brandon. And he and I talk about, like, every 5 years, you're kind of a different teacher. And we think that is good. Because if you're teaching the same year 17 times instead of 17 new years, like, you might have some personal work to do. So,
oh yeah.
So we talked a lot about that, and especially like our last 5 years, as the 5 years of every educator and person on the planet, have been quite dynamic. So we are, we're kind of in a period of building. And actually, one thing that has been interesting if we're talking about the last 5 years, is we used to say, in our own band room culture, when something didn't quite go right, we'd say, that's not the way we do things here. But for the period of the kids who didn't have that, they didn't know that. And so we find that over the last couple of years, we have been reteaching kind of the norms and routines of our classroom, like behaviorally, educationally, pedagogically, all that stuff. We have been reteaching that in like a very concrete way, that the intentionality of teaching culture is 11 out of 10 right now.
Oh yeah. Oh, for sure. And so, like, it comes down to, something I was talking about with another friend. I've been doing a musical lately, so I've been hanging around with another band director like 24/7. So we get to all these like, you get these cool conversations that you're not necessarily going to have just because you're by people. And so I'm thinking about teacher personality, and that is not. And I mean this from the perspective, this isn't something you can teach. My personality, definitely not something you can teach. And I'm sure, and that's the same way. But how important is a teacher's personality? But what impact can a teacher's personality have on that classroom?
Everything. I think teacher's personality is 9 out of 10 part of culture, because so many times we think about the band room as a place, but the thing that defines it is the person in the band room or the people in the band room. So to back up just a quick second here on culture things. So intentional strategies for the listeners, intentional strategies around fostering positive band room culture was my graduate research at Brown University. So I interviewed, for our field notes, 6 different music educators from schools with kind of a tradition of very good culture, but from different social demographics, large urban high school, small rural junior high, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so when we talked about things like this, we saw that the kids wanted to be in the place where their teacher was, and that place is the band room. And because the space is great. The band room is a very nice space, but the draw is what the teacher can get emotionally and connect emotionally with the kids who are in there while they're there. And let me tell you, as you know, a band rehearsal is a great place to have emotional connections and musical connections with young people. So I think about that we all are who we are, and that's cool. But that there is not a sense of magic about this. There are things that we can do as educators that are strategies that will foster positive band group culture. Like if you're, a curmudgeon, you can't just throw your hands up and say, well, it's too late for me. Like, actually, no, there are things they can do that are meaningful and impactful, from something as simple as both what Cord and Christina, your last two guests, had talked about, like greeting kids at the door, saying their name, asking about their I want to say hockey or curling, but that might be lost on some of the American sports folks. If you're not really into curling, it's a great sport.
It looks fun. It looks fun.
So like asking about whatever their football game, asking their ballet recital, like whatever you can, like that is a strategy you can do. You can, if you are a curmudgeon, if you're a bit of a stick in the mud, you can still take a second and think about how you might want to formulate an answer when a kid says something, does something that you might not expect might happen in your space. So I think about that a lot, the extra second of what am I going to say as this is unfolding in front of me? Because sometimes we have teenagers or young people or other adults in the building maybe who are not always aware of how they are feeling or acting in the space. And I think awareness and intention are our two best friends when it comes to working with young people.
Do you feel, because that, again, let's go back to hot take again. Don't you feel that though sometimes we have to just kind of ignore some things, like with what a student, they may be what you might perceive as a negative that day, or even over a current amount of time, because we don't know what's going on inside their head. And that might be something totally unrelated to band. And I want to remind, this is my hot take, I want to remind band directors, it's our job to make sure they're having a great time. It's our job to make sure that no matter how they act, and again, words are ineffective, is what I always say. I don't listen to words. I listen to actions, feeling, tone, all of those things. It took me forever to realize that some of those components, the classroom is mine to control and mine to monitor and mine to guide. And I think that's, I guess, as a teacher, I don't think of myself as a teacher anymore. I think myself as I'm the guide of the classroom and I'm not in control anymore, because I don't want to be. I want the students to have the ownership, and I want to be up there in that front. But part of that is also knowing that everyone who walks by my door, 99.9% of the time, they're having a great day, or band is what they look forward to, which we cannot forget those things. But if something's going intentionally wrong, or a student's acting out, sometimes I have to remember, you know what? I'm going to take what that's given to me, but I'm going to keep solving until I either figure out how to get that student to go into positive speak, how to do any of those things. But it has to be 100%. I cannot, and yeah, there's, I was talking to somebody about discipline, and I was like, not to think about that. Because to me, discipline is a reaction to something bad that happened. But to me, it's the environment that's in place that's more important than the disciplinary action that could have happened. So, like, as you said, maybe talk about your personality and some of the things you do in the classroom. So, besides welcoming kids at the door and all those things, but do you have any, give me some Kenley teacher speak of, like, tell me how your personality has worked for you.
Absolutely. And, knowing, of course, that I am not a perfect person by any capacity.
Oh, no, definitely not.
I endeavor to model kindness as much as I can. I'll take a page out of Madison's book. I model kindness the best I can. And that doesn't always mean being equal and treating everyone exactly equally, but it does mean trying to treat them equitably, that they might not get the same thing, but they all get something. And I think about trying to, again, like, put my best foot forward, or I could be having a rough day, but I can present, I can be honest with them and say, like, oh, not my best day today, but I can still make an effort to present a positive experience. Like you said, like, teachers in control, they're the one controlling the thermostat of how that class is going. So if you come in on a warpath, and again, not every day has been the best teaching day of my life, but if you come in on a warpath, like, you could intentionally kind of dial that back and say, like, I'm feeling really crazy right now, but I've got to have a good jazz rehearsal. So here we go, everybody, buckle up. We got to get through this. And then usually what happens is if you can get out of your own way, you end up having a great time. So sometimes I think about trying to model the grace on them that I hope that they will model with me. when I'm not at my best, I acknowledge when they are also not at their best, and I will do my absolute most to meet them where they are. Like you said, some kids having a bad day, and you can read the room, like, the drummer blows some drum fill, and you just look at them. You don't have to say anything. They know, and you just move on. Like, okay.
Oh my gosh. It's funny you say that, because I think I started my Monday with, like, I don't know whose band this is, kids, but I'll teach this one. I don't know what's going on here, but it changed my whole week, because you're right. I have to model positivity, and yeah, sometimes we have the accidental, yeah, I'm not positive today. And then here's something, like, maybe it's a hot take, maybe it's an agree or disagree. I'm not sure right now, but I've actually told my students, I said, if you don't enjoy the way I'm teaching right now, call me out. And feel free to either talk to me one-on-one or just say something in the classroom, because you know what it is, it's kind of like a reality check for sometimes maybe I'm in a negative space, but and you're right, that classroom can pull you into a positive space like that when you're least expecting it. Because I'll tell you what, my Monday rehearsal and my Friday rehearsal were two completely different things, because it really was mindset. And so yeah, I think that what you're really saying is that intentional mindset, it really affects what we do in the classroom. And so, and I'm thinking about all the ways that, besides the intentional strategies, what does your rehearsal strategies look like? I mean, we can't always be positive. Sometimes we don't need a hot take. I don't know. Sometimes we don't need to be, I want to say positive, because it's not really, it's not a binary. It's not positive or negative. Sometimes it's getting to work, or it's learn to be silent, or it's learn to engage, or it's learn to talk. Everything has a different strategy depending on what it is. But what are some of your tricks of the trade of that classroom rehearsal?
Absolutely. So I do my best to see them at the door, use their name, just things like that. Just like help them feel seen from the first minute. And that doesn't mean that there aren't some days where they're coming in and I'm like, something got messed up with, I'm copying something, or I lost the handout or sometimes that happens and they're walking in. But, I try to have some music going. I run the jazz program at our school. So, working through putting a recording on, or something that we're working towards or listening to. And then I have the order on the board, so the kids know the expectation of the rehearsal, which is a really effective strategy for diffusing student anxiety. Because sometimes students are really keyed up about not knowing what's going to happen next. And that's something that they take very seriously, and it really wraps them up. So when they walk in, they see, like, okay, first bullet point 1 is always welcome. I will always say hello to you first. Right. And we're not going to be like some 80s school movie where, like, they walk in and, hey, everyone take your seats, open your textbook. Like, we're not doing that here. So, how are things going? How are you feeling today? Volleyball championships, how are you, like, just shooting the breeze for a minute. And and then the second thing we start with in jazz band is always this concept I stole from another music educator who is quite wonderful, named Bill Christensen. He has what you've been listening to, which we shorten to beans. What are your beans? And with the idea that there is an expectation that they're engaging in some jazz music outside of their regular day. Dare I say that this music is enjoyable and fun, and that they might actually like it outside of this room. And so what their beans are, like 1, 2, 3. Oh, I got a great bean today, Mr. K. Okay, awesome. Let's do it. We'll throw it up there. And we pick 3 beans. We listen to the first, 45 seconds to a minute. And sometimes they're really surprising. Sometimes they're standards, or a twist on a standard or something. And we talk about, like, where'd you find that? And some Spotify lists, some movie, some whatever. And just to get them to buy in a bit what their beans are. And then we go through it like, okay, kids, we're taking out, hey, burner, we're working on this section. Okay, awesome. Saxophones, expect some attention. This is coming up, so pencils ready. Next, we're working on something else and something else. Like, and this, they know what we're working on, piece, section. So there's sometimes where, like, they're looking ahead. Oh, trumpets didn't practice this one part. So you can see they're like 2 pieces ahead trying to figure out the thing before we get there. But there's never a moment of, okay, trumpets, let's go to that thing that apparently you didn't look at. Like, that doesn't happen, where they get caught off guard. And then all of a sudden, like, then I've lost them. Then, like, anxiety has them. And, like, sometimes they're already wrapped up with, like, their biology test from the last period, or like whatever else they're bringing in, or they got to go pick up their brother from somewhere. Or they have to leave early because their dad's got to go to work and, like, there's only one car. So, like, things like that, like you said, we don't really know what they're bringing in sometimes, but what I can do is I can give them a sense of expectation. That's something I can do that's measurable and meaningful.
But I think also from my standpoint of what you said is you're recognizing the students and you're
Mhm.
making them feel valued. And not only doing it for them personally, but also for the from the context of what you're teaching. So here's a question. This is just random because you said it. So you teach jazz. What's your main instrument? I don't even know what your main instrument is. What's your main instrument?
I grew up as a jazz guitar player, but
Oh,
I did
sweet.
not take it in university. I was a classical euphonium major, believe it or not, in university.
What?
I know, it's true. You can major on that. Wild. Not a great way to get a job after, unless if you're going to be a professional. But um, maybe there's someone who's looking for a euphonium soloist or a euphonium spot in the band. In which case, though, I learned a lot about brass playing, and it was really a powerful experience. Mostly about learning how to practice, learning where my gaps were as an undergrad. I had a kind of a tumultuous undergrad musically, but I learned a lot, and then I became a composer later on in my 20s. I mean, I was always writing music as a teenager. Like that's what I spent a lot of my high school years doing, is like writing and learning MIDI in the early 90s. That was like a big push for me. And I just didn't composition didn't jive with me at the undergrad level. And then I wrote a lot. I got published a few times. I got some choral work published. And then I knew what I knew. And then I was starting to know what I didn't know. And then I had to go to grad school. Like, I need to take this to the next level, because now I know what I want to work on. I didn't just go like undergrad, grad, like, and then I'm 25. And I like, it took me a while to learn where my gaps were compositionally. And then I went to Brandon University in Brandon, Manitoba, and studied with this composer named T. Patrick Carabray, who is now at UBC. And I learned so much, and now I'm working on it. But yeah, classical euphonium is where that story started.
Well, that was interesting because my conversation actually, it's funny. By the way, there's a whole suite out there. There's Lincolnshire Posey. There's some euphonium solos out there that we all need to know. I also played euphonium all through college, FYI, but I am a sax player.
Gotcha.
But somehow I learned that saxophone and marching band is a bad idea for your pad, so I switched to baritone for marching band, and then it kept going in euphonium. Anyway, enough about that. Because what I was talking about is, like, the stuff that you brought to your jazz rehearsal. It made me think. It's our classrooms are sometimes built upon our knowledge and what the kids' knowledge are, and so, like, I always think it's so important to bring that conversation into that classroom. So if you don't have a jazz background, it starts with conversations of, like, artists, albums. Did I say albums? I'm super old.
Okay.
Music. I know,
Yeah.
right? Music, but when I say it, because it really helps your students build that thing. So when you tell me that your students are bringing music to the classroom and they're sharing and it builds, I think that is so important. But I do want to talk about, because it goes back to the thing, because first you were a euphonium player. I go guitar first, euphonium second, but then you brought up that your composition, and maybe let's get a little bit of your composition strategy. So, like, I know I saw Colossus come up. I'm reading all the titles as they come up. I know Icelandic folk dance is number one, but, like, you said all these gaps. So you went to grad school, and then all of a sudden these gaps got kind of filled in. Maybe you can talk about that journey of what some of those things that you picked up, and talk about maybe some of your compositions out there. Because, one of the things that's important to me is always finding new literature, always finding things, like I said, programming, for those of us who program years in advance. I always like to have, so here's one, Colossus. So number one, the first thing that I just have to be kind of a nerd here. I totally see Assassin's Creed Odyssey right now. So, like, I'm very excited because it makes me think there's my video game for that. But let's talk about Colossus for a second. Tell us about Colossus.
Sure. So this is one of the pieces it's available on my website. So it's not in traditional publishing right now. When I was in grad school, my advisor really wanted me to focus on contrast and kind of stretching. And he said, so your pieces, Kenley, are very interesting and diverse in this window. And I want you to make this window this window. I want you to stretch, like, take the ideas and then, like, pull them further. So writing things that are longer, that are more complex, that, like, emphasize form more, like more things happen in succession. Kind of use broader instruments. So Colossus has, like, English horn, it has contrabass, clarinet, and my advisor said, I just want you to broaden your palette a bit. So it has kind of non-Western harmony. If we're going to go deep down the video game rabbit hole, it is so incredibly emphasized by 2001's Shadow of the Colossus. which is written by Kotani and has a few little nods in there. But yeah, like it's that this was a piece that I wrote during grad school, and it really opened my eyes to a lot of different ways of doing things. So I got to stretch and then work with my advisor about how to stretch it more, and then I would stretch it more, and then we worked on more and more. And during that time, we talked about contrast and color and form and like a lot of these big concepts. Whereas like I teach junior symphonic at my school, like the symphonic band for our 9s and 10s. And so I work with a lot of 2s and 3s, which are kind of my wheelhouse. But he said, like, I want you to start thinking about like 4s and 5s and to start to broaden the wheelhouse of what does that mean then if it's a 5, then like what kinds of color do you have? What kinds of harmony? What key centers do you move to? So like that kind of studying, which I thought was interesting.
Well, let me add for our listener out there, if you're listening out here, to get to his music, his website is kenleykristofferson.com, KenleyKristofferson.com. So that I don't want to shortchange the listener, because I do believe that literature is study. It's things, but you said a couple things like contrast and color. So like I love those words, because I really feel like contrast is one of those things, again, a concept that we teach in the classroom. Contrast creates interesting things. And so here's my question about color, because I know from color, I'd assume that's about did you mean tone color? But here's my question as a musician. I also see music and kind of the world in color. So sometimes that color transforms to like what I see and how those colors represent, using that as a descriptive, or using that as a way to communicate what's going on in the music. So contrast and color, amazing. And so that's kind of what shaped you. But what else, anything else in your music that brings to mind?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am lucky that I'm a composer and an educator. So I think about the kinds of music that I want to put in front of my kids, and I have an avenue to do that. And I want that music to connect with them emotionally. That's really important. So one of my pieces that was published last year by C.L. Barnhouse is called The Meeting Place. And it's about where your meeting places are in your life. And for a lot of kids in the commissioning ensemble, they talked about the band room, but that might be your school. There we go. That might be your school. That might be your church. That might be your hockey locker room. That might be your gym. Like it could be a lot of places, but like we want kids to play the music and then engage with the music narratively. So like, what is your meeting place, kids? What does it feel like when you are contributing to your meeting place? And that kind of thing. There's another piece that is getting published next year by Clark T. Smith Publications called Black Bear. And Black Bear is a folk song from the place where I live. The place, oh my goodness, and there it is.
Hey, look at this.
And it's a folk song from Lake Winnipeg, which is near the town I grew up called Gimli, Manitoba. And so the premiering ensemble was the Gimli High School Band. And the teacher said to his kids, like, this is music that is about the place where we are. There's stories that are connected with people in the audience. And like the person running the raffle table, who is also my grade 6 teacher, because it's a small town, right? And she said like, oh, Blackbird, my dad had that record, the Lake Winnipeg Fisherman record. And like, she had this whole story about it. And there was this other kid who was just sitting there like kind of nearby and thought like, that's the song we're playing in band. And like, just these connections about place and culture and history and stories and generations, like that's really important. Not that I don't love like playing Shenandoah again, or like some other folk song that's very known throughout our community, but like when you share music from a place where people are, that changes their whole perspective of it.
Wow. And don't you think though that brings part of the culture of what you're bringing to the class? Doesn't that make culture of that piece more important to your classroom? And again, like all we're trying to do is bring knowledge to our students. Not, think about, here's one for you. You've had what? You're on cycle number 5 if you've had kids for 4 years. You're on the 5th cycle of those 5th kids. Every single set of 4-year kids you've ever had have had a completely different experience. True or false?
Oh, true. 100%.
Yeah. And the sad part is in my continuous improvement brain, the last set of kids have always gotten like the best version of me. Not that the ones in the past were bad, but it's shaped by those experiences. So, some of those intentional things that we do as band directors, but you get to do it from 2 fronts. You get to do it from composition and you get to do it from band director. And I just assume you also get to do it through, I'm sure you've talked around, I'm sure you do clinics or any of those things, but either composition or educationally, what has culturally shaped your teaching the most lately?
Lately has been, that's a great question. Let me think about that for a second.
Oh,
There's that extra,
I can.
there's that extra second of thinking before I answer too quickly. I think lately I've been thinking about resilience and getting kids to know that their best is good enough. And so just to give you some context, we have a huge Christmas show that we do between band, choir, and jazz band for the community. Like 800 people show up every night, and we do multiple nights. And like the community comes to the Christmas show. And there are kids who have to learn like 12 to 15 pieces of music. And if you're in grade 10 and you're like in the band, you have to learn like 6 or 7 of those, you're thinking like, holy crow, I got to learn 7 pieces of music in like the first 3 months of high school. And they're like super stressed, like it's not good enough. I haven't practiced enough. And they get into that scarcity mindset immediately. And so as we had on our board last week, like your best is good enough. You've already done enough. Like don't let perfect be the enemy of good. You're doing your best, and that's all we expect of you.
Here's my take on that. Rather than stress perfection, this is the David Coons, who's one of our former guests. It's about perfect intent, not perfection. And to change that mindset. Because if you go for perfection, the problem is we're imperfect beings and we're going to fail at the word perfection. So I learned to start using perfect intent. One of those magical things that changed me and how I talk to my students and forever. So let's think about another couple of things here. So like, I love this because I think culturally, like I said, this show, culture before content, has always been. And I think that's what it is. Who we are as teachers, who we are as musicians. Because I always think that's too, we always forget about, we're not just educators, we're also musicians. Mm-hmm. And, sometimes we forget, hey, kids, I actually have lived everything that you're doing and kind of having some of those shared experiences. Do you have any shared experience stories for the kids that you use? Or do you like, what kind of things do you bring from the musician to your classroom?
Yeah, my kids, when they proof work of mine, that often comes up as when, like, for example, like I'm writing a counter melody and it's like euphonium, tenor sax, and like I'm really excited about it. But then when we play it and like, oh, this counter melody is way too loud. And like they're not doing anything wrong. And I'll make that comment and they're like, that's like, why would you say that, Mr. K? And I'll say, well, because when we play it, like I thought I scored it this way and I did, but then when real people play it, it's different. And I said, like, well, how many times has that ever happened where you plan something and you think it's going to work and then it mostly works, but we could change it to make it a little bit better. And they said, like, well, that's a band rehearsal. It's like, it's mostly pretty good, but we could change it to make it a little bit better. And so they come and see my music there. They also, like, if they follow me on Instagram, they're getting like my sketches and like, I'm working on this new thing, or here's the A section of something. Cause I want them to see that I'm also doing the thing. I'm also a musician. And like, there are moments that just get me out of bed in the morning. They also see, I think, a lot how much I really enjoy teaching jazz band. Like jazz band to me is really fun. And like when we're cooking and all the engines are go, there is kind of a relaxed urgency that is not like frenetic, but there's some momentum that is happening that's quite contagious and really quite joyous. And so they see sometimes where they said, like, it looks like you had a good day today. I said, I think I did have a good day today. Did you have a good day? Oh, I had a great day. Yeah. Like, and they'll respond with like, yeah, that was really fun. And like, when they say that your class is fun, they don't mean it's like a parade. I think they mean we got better and we enjoyed it.
Well, I would say that's a tribute to you and your infectious positivity, because I would say that our students react off of us. And yeah, we don't have to have the best days every day, but I think our habits that we have are amazing. So does it feel like 54 minutes has gone by? Because it goes so fast.
It was so fast. I really enjoyed this conversation.
I'm going to give you your last two. Actually, I'm going to give you a double. I'm giving you a 2-part final final thought. So first thought is your cultural take. So this is culture before content. Your final take on culture, whether it's for music or not. But I want a part 2 on yours. Your compositions, and maybe what a little bit that had to offer, and maybe just, talk about your compositions and what they mean to the outside world, to those of people, because I want people to get interested in what you do and see it. I know we talked a little bit about them. So one, I would love your take on culture. And number two, maybe just a little bit more about your compositions for our studio audience.
Oh, thank you so much. Culture is around the routines that are in your room. It's not just one day. It's kind of a way of being, doing, and thinking. And that's something that my teacher partner and I talk a bit about, like that kind of language of being, doing, and thinking. So it's how our students are feeling when they're in our space. It's about the actions they're choosing to take or not take sometimes. And then thinking about what is appropriate or maybe not so appropriate in our spaces. So when we talk about like how they're feeling in our space, are they able to be the range of emotions that they feel in our classroom? Like, do they feel comfortable enough, vulnerable enough, or safe enough to experience the breadth of feelings that young people have? So like if they're in culture with great classroom, I mean, goodness, it's unrealistic. Like you said before, like that we're going to have great days every day, but like, do our kids feel safe enough to bring their authentic selves to the room, regardless of what that is? And I think like when we talk about kind of the doing part, like, I mean, culture, I think is measured in action. That just to go back to the research, like it's not magic. It's something that can be achieved through intentional strategies and through intentional actions. And like actually, this is gonna be a bit off topic, but like one thing we notice when culture is really good is that we have great volunteerism. There are kids who are like stacking chairs at the end of the week so the room can get vacuumed. There are kids who are helping out at some fundraiser. There are kids who are helping with each other. And so one of our thermometers is when no one volunteers for things like setting up the lights at the Christmas show. Like we got to take a hard look. It's like, well, what's really going on here? But when things are cooking, then that's something that's happening regularly. So being, doing, thinking. Okay, so thinking. So as I said before, I teach high school, and I think teenagers get a bad rap in this age group. But like I have taught some really incredible adolescents in my 17 years. And when the culture is good, they're thinking about music, they're listening to it on their phones, they're excited about concerts and upcoming events. And hopefully the feeling of the music room follows them through the rest of their lives. Maybe not even like distantly, but into the weekend. They're having a great band rehearsal and it follows them to the end of the day. I think that's a real gift of a good culture to kids in our program.
Amazing. And how about just a little bit about your compositions and where people can find more information about you?
Absolutely. So I have a lot of music through traditional press. I have music with C.L. Barnhouse, with Claude Smith. Recently, I have some new work coming out next year with Carl Fisher, which I'm really excited about. And I think that the music that I write comes from the place of an educator. So I want to write music that kids can connect with on a meaningful level. So I encourage your listeners to read the program notes, which is something I tell to all sorts of teachers, like, please read the program notes. They are about something and it helps kids connect with the music in a really deep and visceral way. If you just tell them the story, they'll buy in. And so a lot of music is about connection. It's about connecting with places. I'm Canadian, so I kind of a Canadian perspective on a few things. One of my pieces, Prairie Wedding, is about very much the Canadian prairies. And the meeting place is about band rooms or I should say meeting places. For me, it's the band room. That's my meeting place, but it could be a lot of places. So we just want to make sure that when we're picking music, it's connecting with kids. And I will say that I make a concerted effort to write music that connects with young people. So I hope that people listening can explore some of my music, maybe find something that speaks to them, and share it with their kids. And maybe drop me a line if they want any further information, or if I can do anything to help them out.
Which, by the way, KenleyKristofferson.com. I believe that's my selling point there. Well, thank you for connecting today. Thank you for sharing your culture today. You are just like, wow, you are just like positivity. Amazing. And so thank you for coming on the show today.
Thanks so much for having me, David. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you back. All righty, folks. Well, thanks for tuning into our episode today. Wasn't that great? Remember, this is on the Music for All podcast network, which you can find at musicforall.com. Sorry, I always say .com, musicforall.org/podcast. And again, I want to thank Yamaha, our national presenting sponsor, and Music for All for making this possible. We're grateful for their continued support. And also, I want to say thank you to my wonderful and amazing staff. And before I forget, spread the word. I love this show. I love what it offers. And today was another example of just amazing people that are out there and all the things we can learn from them. So thanks for coming today. And we hope to see you all next week for another great episode.